It seems I spent my whole life working to make my wife happy, and it was a complete waste of time. It really hurts a man to realize that all his efforts and intentions were in vain. After 23 years of marriage, I now understand that I never really knew the mother of my children. She always wanted something better. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. She made me feel like I was a good provider, and I always felt good when I could give her something, but she always wanted more. Sharon and I got married right after finishing high school. Sharon had dark hair, which she wore short. She was pretty and had an excellent figure. Our sex life was always good until recently, and I had no reason to doubt her fidelity. I started with engine repairs, and today I am a mechanic for heavy machinery. I earn damn good money, or at least I think I do. Our early life was quite typical. Our first house was small, and we moved twice as the children came along. Now both children are gone. Our daughter Sarah got married, and our son John joined the Air Force. The house is now bigger than we need, but she still didn't seem happy. Both of my parents died in a car accident many years ago. When the kids left, Sharon said she needed something to do, and of course, that's when the problems started. She took a job at a real estate management firm. Except for a few clerical staff, it was essentially a one-man firm run by Glenn Sebastian, her boss. Of course, I met the guy. I didn't like him, and eventually, he had an affair with my wife, even though he was married. At that moment, I simply decided to give up. What was the point of continuing? My children were grown, and my wife was unfaithful. I made one last attempt. Sharon, since there are no longer children at home, I would like to sell the house and move to Florida. How do you feel about that? I can find a job there, and we could live a good life under the warm sun of Florida. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. She didn't even look up from the morning newspaper. Our conversations were becoming less and less civilized every day. Of course, the problem was with me. I'm not good with words, and I can't convince anyone because I simply don't have the necessary language skills. Sharon tolerated this because she was used to it. Glenn Sebastian was the complete opposite. He always knew what to say and how to say it. It was easy to understand how he managed to lure my wife into his bed. I think what I'm trying to say, Sharon, is that I would like to take you away from Glenn Sebastian to get my life back. Charlie, Glenn isn't going to disappear, and there's nothing to go back to. I'm going to keep working, and you're going to keep working, and we are not moving anywhere. End of discussion. Even though I had evidence of the affair, I never talked about it with Sharon. She went about her daily business, thinking I was too stupid to understand what was happening. With $2,000 from my fund for a fishing boat, I obtained a detective's report and photographs of everything that was going on. Sharon was still reading the newspaper when I left for work. That day, I quit my job. Being with Sharon was very fun when we first got married. We went fishing together, and I attended several concerts to please her. We did various little things to make each other happy. Children complicated our lives, but we always found time to entertain ourselves. As the children grew older, it seemed I worked harder. I think that was when we began to drift apart. I wanted to save money for our retirement. Sharon wanted to enjoy a good life. She insisted on driving a BMW, which I felt we couldn't afford. It was easier for her to get it than to argue about it. No matter how hard I tried, I still couldn't keep her away from Glenn Sebastian's bed. I love her, but I didn't like the way she treated me. So I gave up. Seymour Schlam, my favorite lawyer, received the next $2,000 from my yacht fund. I handed him the detective's report and the photographs. I signed a few blank forms, attached a power of attorney for the property, and told him to serve the divorce papers next Monday. Today was Sharon and Glenn's motel day. They went to the same motel, the same room, at the same time, on the same days of the week. What Sharon found thrilling about this was beyond my understanding. They usually checked in around 11 and left at 2. I still had a few hours to prepare. Sebastian's holding company owned many small buildings they rented out, but the main income came from 2 old warehouses. Glenn acquired them for a pittance when the previous owners refused to bring the buildings up to code. No one worked at the warehouses. They were just used for storing goods and the like for various local businesses. I was willing to bet that Glenn hadn't even installed a fire alarm system. I spent 30 minutes at each warehouse, setting up the equipment, and then headed to the bank. I cleaned out my savings account, checking account, and money market account. After canceling the credit cards, I took all the money and put it in a locker at the bus station. It was time to act. The plan was simple: cause mass destruction and sit in jail. I couldn't see how anything could go wrong. I arrived at the Decay Motel parking lot just as fire engines raced down the street at high speed. On the other side of the town, 2 major warehouse fires occurred, and all the fire units responded to them. Sharon's BMW was parked right next to Glenn's Mercedes. I parked my F-150 at the back of the parking lot and took out the tools of my new trade from the trunk. An emergency glass breaking hammer, an aluminum baseball bat, and a pair of pliers. Precision and timing were crucial. At any moment, Glenn could receive a call informing him about the fires at his warehouses. I needed to hurry. I lit a towel soaked in gasoline and shoved it into the fuel tank of my car. I had to run as fast as I could because it took only a few seconds for the Ford to burst into flames. It was not a loud explosion like in the movies, but more of a muffled whoosh. It seems strange to destroy one's own car, but I no longer needed it. It took less than a minute to cut the valve stems of 8 tires. I took my time and went around each car, breaking every window with the emergency hammer. It worked well. The only problem was that Glenn's car alarm went off after the first hit. Before he realized what was happening, I started smashing the BMW with the baseball bat. I thoroughly damaged each panel. By then, the hotel personnel and several people who were staying there were in the parking lot, each seemingly with a mobile phone pressed to their ear. I was standing on the roof of the Mercedes when Glenn finally came out of the room, pulling up his pants. He was yelling something at me, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I think he wanted me to stop smashing the roof of his car, but I wasn't sure. I returned to the BMW and continued to beat it a bit more until the police finally arrived. Fire engines were all over the city at the scene of the major double warehouse fire, so they just had to let my poor car burn down completely. When the cops were settling me into the patrol car, I saw Sharon peeking out of the motel room window. I was processed, fingerprinted, and photographed within an hour. The photographer got annoyed because I refused to remove the smug smile from my face. It was nice to finally sit in my cell and relax. Since I pleaded guilty to everything that happened at the motel, there was no need for any prolonged drama in the courtroom, like on television. They mentioned something about the warehouses a few times. I told them I knew nothing about it, and they soon dropped it. I'm sure they would have put it all together later, but right then, they had no solid connection. As soon as word spread around the station about what I had done and why I had done it, everything seemed to become a bit more comfortable. The next morning, Sharon was there with my bail. There was no money in the account, so the only place she could have gotten it was from Glenn or by taking out a second mortgage. I was almost certain Glenn wouldn't want to put down 10% of $400,000. I could see Sharon through the glass partitions at the cashier's booth. She looked truly furious. I knew she knew the accounts had been wiped clean. They returned my watch, wallet, shoelaces, and money. I was afraid to go out through the lobby, so I asked one of the guards if there was another way out to avoid my hostile wife. He chuckled slightly, led me to the fire exit, held the door alarm switch with his baton, and let me out into the alley. Finally free, at last on the loose. After retrieving cash from the locker, I bought a bus ticket to Chicago. I had no specific place in mind, but there was an express bus going there. I had plenty of time to think while watching the agricultural landscapes pass by the window. I was in a much worse state now than before, but at least my unfaithful wife was no longer there to humiliate me. With my lifestyle, I had enough cash to last a couple of years, but I knew I would eventually need to find some work to keep from going insane. I had no idea what to do about income tax and Social Security. I didn't even know how I was going to get a driver's license, and I knew sooner or later I would have to sort that out. After Chicago, I chose some smaller routes that seemed to stop in every little town across the Midwest. Traveling through the heart of South Dakota, I found a newspaper someone had left behind. I was incredibly bored, so I began reading every line in the newspaper. When I got to the classifieds, I found myself reading the same advertisement 4 times. Heavy agricultural machinery mechanic needed. Permanent residency provided. Housing, meals, and salary based on experience. Contact Leroy Summer. I had never even heard of Mitchell, South Dakota. Despite it being late summer, it was cold. The sky was gray, and the land not much more appealing. It seemed like the perfect place to sink into my misery. The Fairfax Equipment Repair Shop was housed in a large steel building resembling an airplane hangar. The sliding doors were actually big enough to accommodate the largest agricultural equipment. I never found out where the name came from, probably the previous owner. I had no trouble getting the job. The living quarters were on the upper floor of the maintenance building. It was stark and not very homey. The pay was low for this type of work, and the mention of boarding meant there was a mini kitchen in the room. The best part of all this was my new roommate, Jorge. Jorge Toledo was born in El Paso, so he was not an illegal immigrant. He was a bit older than me, but we had similar builds and appearances. He wore his long hair tied back in a ponytail, and he had large mustaches that drooped at the ends, like Pancho Villa's. I was clean-shaven, with short hair and glasses. I liked Jorge as soon as I met him. He worked in hydraulics and mechanics, and he was looking forward to having a machinist like me on the job. We made the perfect team. Also, he had a Mazda truck, which I hadn't seen in many years. I think they stopped making them in the 70s, but his was still running, having clocked over 300,000 kilometers. Within a few weeks, I had settled in and was enjoying my new life. Both of us were terrible cooks, so we spent a lot of time eating out, mostly fast food and junk at diners. Jorge was an alcoholic. Leroy was not a strict boss. We could come and go as we pleased and watch the work being done. Leroy handled all the money and client interactions, so all Jorge and I needed to do was fix the broken equipment. We enjoyed going to truck stops along the interstate and having late-night breakfasts. Life was good. 4 months had passed. I was returning from a delivery, and Leroy and Jorge were waiting in the parking lot. They both seemed to be laughing as I parked the delivery vehicle. What the hell is so funny? I tried to give the situation a serious tone. Well, we had a visitor today. A private detective from Philadelphia was looking for Charlie Terrell, Leroy said, seemingly enjoying the moment. Although Jorge and I were quite close, our relationship with Leroy remained on a professional level. We were all kindred spirits, but Leroy made great efforts to avoid becoming too friendly with his employees. It was easier for him to crack the whip if he kept his distance. Oh damn, I was afraid this would happen. Was he from my wife or the bail company? He never said. Also didn't mention how he tracked you down here. Well, I guess I better move on. Where is he now? Jorge started laughing, and Leroy's snickering seemed to encourage him. Jorge was drunk again. What the hell is going on? What's so funny? Jorge couldn't hold back anymore. Leroy told the guy that I was Charlie Terrell. The guy looked at the photo and shook his head. We talked a bit, and I told him I was an illegal immigrant and had bought the social security number and driver's license from a guy in Denver. He got really mad, but that idiot never asked to see my ID. About 20 minutes later, he got in his car and left. You guys are a great team. It's nice just being around you. Leroy was still giggling as he went back to his office. It was getting colder. Most of the work now involved maintenance rather than repair. There was no rush, and we could work at a good pace. The nights became longer and colder. The days were gray and gloomy. I liked it. Jorge started drinking more. I had a break over the weekend. When Jorge and I entered the Four Corners truck stop bar, I noticed a cell phone on the seat. Usually, I would have just notified the waitress and gone on my way, but today I had a different idea. I told Jorge to order for me, and I stepped outside. First, I decided to call Sarah. Dad. What the hell are you doing in Tulsa? I thought I should call you and let you know that I'm alright. That's great. We've been worried, and Mom is going crazy. What led to all this? Everyone said you lost your mind? What did your mother tell you? Only that you were unhappy with her job, and when she refused to quit, you freaked out and smashed her car and her boss's car. That's it? That's all she told you? Yes. After posting bail, she said you just vanished. She hired a detective, but he couldn't find you. I think it cost her a lot of money. Next time you see her, ask for a more detailed explanation. She owes you that. She's not telling the whole story. What are you doing in Tulsa? The caller ID says Tulsa. I'm not in Tulsa, but I guess the guy letting me use his phone must be from there. Next time you talk to John, let him know everything is okay. How's your mom doing? Do you mean, besides being pissed off and bitter? She lost a house after you refused to post bail, and she had to move into a trailer on the highway. The insurance company refused to cover the damage to the car, so she had to buy one from a lot that finances itself. The BMW finance company is still demanding payments for the car. She's working at the Waffle House near the airport and has to work extra shifts to make ends meet. Every time I talk to her, she curses you to high heaven. Mom is not happy. Well, at least there's some good news. Dad, you're sick. Are you going to tell me what's going on? No. Don't tell your mom I called. If you want to know more about what's happening, you'll have to get it from her. I guess I understand. Call again when you can. I love you. I love you too and wish I could see you. Bye. I thought I had a few more minutes before my food arrived, so I called Seymour. Seymour, it's Charlie Terrell. What's going on? Oh damn Charlie. You're in deep shit. The bail company is after you. The cops and your wife are looking for you. Wow. Nice to be wanted, Seymour. How's my divorce proceeding? It's all set. Sharon grumbled a bit, but she eventually signed all the documents. It should be finalized in about 3 weeks unless there are complications. By the way, you no longer have a home. Yeah, I heard about that. Just curious, what's the status of Glenn Sebastian? Mr. Sebastian has left, vanished, disappeared from the scene. That's another thing that pissed off your wife. I think she was looking for him to give her some support, and then he skipped town. It turns out he submitted fake reports to the insurance and mortgage companies about repairing the sprinkler systems at his warehouses. The insurance company knew it was arson, and he was the prime suspect, so they refused to pay out. 2 people who had their goods stored in his warehouses also couldn't get their insurance, and Glenn had to run to save his skin. By the way, I have to report this call to the police. You know that, right? I figured as much. What are you going to tell them? That you contacted me from Tulsa to inquire about the status of your divorce. Is that okay? That's fine, Seymour. I would appreciate it, though, if you didn't tell Sharon. Can you send the documents to my daughter once the divorce is final? No problem. Take care, Charlie. I'm glad you called. By the time I got back to my seat, the waitress was already setting down the plates. Before we finished eating, a monstrous trucker approached the table looking for his mobile phone. He seemed ecstatic to have his phone returned and reluctantly agreed to take $20 when I told him I had made 2 calls. Everyone moved to leave, but I made Jorge pay for breakfast. He had to stop and stock up on booze for the next week before heading home. Snow had fallen, and work slowed down. Leroy didn't mind, and Jorge and I spent more time relaxing. Jorge's drinking got even worse. I hadn't cut my hair since I left home. Now it was long enough to tie back. For fun, I grew a mustache. Each day, Jorge and I looked more alike. One day, when he was half sober, I made him explain why he drank. I was married to a beautiful woman named Marisol. We lived in Waco. I had a good job and a beautiful home. One day, Marisol came home and found me in bed with her sister. I hated her sister and never understood why I wanted to sleep with her, but I did. Marisol threatened to emasculate me if I didn't leave immediately. I loved her, and since that day, I drink to drown out the pain of my stupidity. I would do anything to change what happened. At least I had an explanation. I wished he would stop drinking or at least cut down, but he seemed to be trying to drink himself to death. I kept thinking of Nicolas Cage in that depressing movie. I was amazed he got as much work done as he did. My driver's license was about to expire. I didn't know what to do. I could probably just go and get a new one, but I was afraid they would notify Pennsylvania and someone would track me down. Jorge had a South Dakota license that also needed to be renewed. After endless hours of drunken debates, we decided that I would go and renew Jorge's license with my photo and signature. Jorge said he didn't want to drive anymore, not under any circumstances. We figured that if I took off my glasses and combed my hair properly, I could pull it off. I didn't fully consider the trouble I'd be in if caught. By the end of the week, I was Jorge Toledo, with a driver's license to prove it. Jorge said I should also start using his social security number. He wasn't hiding from the law, just from an angry wife who probably wasn't even looking for him. Jorge started drinking more and was incapacitated half the time. Leroy knew what was happening but chose to kindly ignore it. Finally, about 2 months later, just as spring began, Jorge died in his sleep. He was only 45 years old. Leroy notified the authorities, and we arranged for the cremation that Jorge had requested. What happened next astounded me. When the coroner came for Jorge, Leroy helped him fill out the necessary paperwork. I tried not to interfere until they were finished. After the coroner left, Leroy handed me a copy of the death certificate. At the top of the page was the name Charles Raymond Terrell. 3 days later, Leroy and I scattered his ashes to the wind. Since Jorge was not wanted by the ins or the law, new opportunities opened up for me. Leroy was busy looking for a replacement until we got too busy. I decided it would be safe to get a credit card. I couldn't justify buying my own cell phone. Leroy bought several to use at work to replace the old CB radios, and they had unlimited time and range. I traded the Mazda for a Ford Ranger. It was time to call Sarah before she heard the bad news of my demise. Dad, you're in South Dakota. Shouldn't the caller ID show differently? Don't tell your mother. No way. I finally got her to admit why you left. I have no sympathy for her at all. By the way, the divorce papers arrived last month. You're officially free. Unfortunately, I'm also officially dead. What the hell does that mean? One of the guys at work died, and the coroner put my name on the death certificate. You'll probably receive a notification soon, so act surprised and upset, but don't be too distraught about it. You can tell John, but please, not your mother. Wow. That's certainly bizarre. I don't know how you managed it, but I guess congratulations are in order. No one else must know about this. I hope the police and your mother will stop looking for me. I've been cremated, and my ashes have been scattered to the four winds, so no funeral or service is needed. I think it's good that Grandma and Grandpa are dead. Sorry, I didn't have insurance for you. Don't worry about the insurance. We are all doing well, and John is fine. He just got promoted again and is also back on the list for another tour. Do you have a new name, or is it better if I don't know it? Let's just say your father is now a Mexican American and leave it at that. Dad, can Eric and I come to see you? I'm pregnant and would really like to spend some time with you. I know it's not good for you to come back home, but can we come there? We got a new Subaru Outback, and Eric is dying to take it on a trip. Let me think about it, and I'll contact you next week. I don't see why not, but I don't have a place for you to stay. I'm living in a garage. I'm sure there are motels nearby. I'll be waiting for your call. Don't forget. I found a small motel nearby and notified Sarah. They would be here in a week. Leroy still hadn't found a replacement for Jorge. That evening, I ate breakfast alone again, and it wasn't nearly as enjoyable as with my old friend. I thought about him on my way back to the garage and how sad he was when he died. I hated the thought of dying alone like that. Leroy was waiting for me when I arrived. He had a smug smile on his face, indicating he had a surprise for me. I wasn't eager to find out what it was. You have a visitor. Who the hell could be visiting me? Surprise! It's your wife. The world stopped not because I was ecstatic, but because I was terrified of what was to come. All efforts and all the trouble were in vain. No way could that crap have found me, yet she did. I slowly made my way to the workshop, while Leroy was grinning ear to ear. What the hell was so funny? I crossed the floor and ascended the stairs. Without hesitation, I opened the door and stepped inside. Who the hell are you? Before me stood the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Her long black hair and dark eyes accentuated her Latin features. Although she was well into her 30s, her body looked a decade younger. Her question caught me off guard, and I quickly realized why Leroy found this so amusing. Marisol had finally found Jorge. The man she kicked out 2 years ago, but apparently never forgot. You're not Jorge. Who the hell are you? Why did that nasty man send me here saying Jorge would soon be here? I took a chair and gestured for her to sit. As she sat down, her eyes stayed fixed on mine as if she didn't trust me. Would you like something to drink? No. Just tell me what's happening. Over the next hour, I tried to explain to Marisol how much Jorge loved her and how much he regretted what he had done to her. In the course of the story, I also had to explain how I ended up using his name and why. There was still some of Jorge's unfinished alcohol, and we decided to help him finish it. I don't know if we were mourning Jorge's death or our own sorrows. She stayed the night, and the next day we went to the open spot where Leroy and I had scattered the ashes. Later that day, she went home without the prize she hoped to find. She had forgiven his infidelity, but she never got the chance to tell him until I opened the credit card account. I mourned her loss. I think in the fairy tale ending, Marisol and I would have been making wild, passionate love, but unfortunately, this was real life. Next week, Sarah will come to visit. At least I have something to look forward to.